Hello and welcome to the Baseball Wisconsin podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gotzler. All right, we're in the fifth inning of Game 7 here, where we are going to sit down with head baseball coach at UW-Stevens Point, Nat Richter. Now, Coach Richter, UW-SP alumni, has a great story about his journey as a player and his time coaching in other programs. Talks about the coaches he's worked under, his mentors, gets into their program, some of his practice planning tips, some of the things he does outside of his program in the private sector with club baseball, and has so many great nuggets throughout. And throughout this episode, we hear so much about team and practice planning and competing. And, if you had a chance to hear Coach Richter at the WBCA last weekend, he's got a ton of great competitions, a ton of great drills, and just one of the fantastic coaches in the state of Wisconsin. So without further ado, head baseball coach at UW-Stevens Point, Nat Richter. Hey, Coach, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Awesome, man. I appreciate you. Hey, well, for the listeners, let's just get started. Give us a background in coaching and playing. Where'd you grow up? Kind of your journey through baseball.
Yeah, I'm Nat Richter. Grew up, never actually grew up, but born and raised in Eau Claire till about third grade. Moved to Waukesha till about eighth grade, and then moved up to Green Bay. I went to high school in Green Bay, so lived all over the state. Played, in Eau Claire. Then I played in Waukesha with the travel ball team, and I played for Green Bay Preble. Was recruited by a number of schools. Stevens Point was probably my best option, so I went there. And after college, I thought, because I wasn't very good at baseball, I figured I'd go into coaching. So that was a pretty easy transition for me. Started at St. Norbert, because that's where I was from, Green Bay. So I called Tom Winsky. He said, sure. So for about $800 a year, I started at St. Norbert, and I worked at Texas Roadhouse, and I was a janitor, and I worked for Kirby Vacuum, selling vacuums. And after 8 years, I got an opportunity to coach at Northwood University, which is Division II out in Michigan, as the infield coach. And that was great, but it was part-time again, so I worked at Olive Garden while I was out there, and, moved back home during COVID, and then luckily enough, Stevens Point job opening, and I applied and got lucky and got the job.
All right. I love it. I love the humility in there and poking fun at yourself. Well, I got to go back to your playing days a little bit. So obviously you played at Point. You had a tremendous career, played in the World Series, just read more about your bio. What kind of player were you? Position wise, makeup, maybe is there a player that, a comp that reminds me of your playing style?
Probably like Raphael Billiard from the 1980s, for anyone who even knows who that is. I was good defender, very weak hitter, but my hands were really good. So that's kind of what got me recruited and got me on the team. And then I wasn't a very good hitter my first few years here. And then I kind of figured out how to hit the ball hard and got in the weight room and ended up being okay offensively. But I started as a real slappy kind of guy, bunting, running, that kind of thing, and then ended up as more of a, I don't want to use the term power guy. That's a little excessive, but more hitting for more power. I think I led the team in doubles or something like that. I don't even know, but by my senior year, I could actually hit the ball over the fencing. So that was a little better.
Well, and like you mentioned, your playing days end, you get into coaching. Where does that itch come from? When did that get on your radar that maybe this is something you wanted to do and start chasing this part of your career?
Well, I was going to in my head, I was going to play for the Brewers, be the shortstop. And then by about junior year of college, I realized that wasn't happening anymore. So I kind of began to think about coaching probably my senior year. My brain has always worked in an analytical manner. So I think, to be honest, that was more suited for me than playing ever was. So it was a pretty easy transition. It was making it into a career that was the big decision I had. So, I was at St. Norbert and working a ton of different jobs and trying to scrape money together, trying to figure out if this is what I wanted to do for a living. And by about year 6 or 7 at St. Norbert, instead of just helping out, I started to like do more for the program and really try and better myself, because I thought, well, I'm not really good at a whole lot of stuff, so maybe this is the calling. And so when I got to Northwood, I had pretty much made the decision to make it a career move, which is different than just coaching, on the side.
Well, I think there's some great lessons in there, and again, you're working side jobs, you're piecing it together, you're going through your 20s, your life's going on, and you got to make these decisions. Are there some like moments that you can remember that you're like, well, I got to figure this out? Like I'm at one of those tipping points in my career where I got to either go all in or think about doing something else.
Yeah, I've had girlfriends remind me of that in the past, that I needed to make a decision. But when I always loved baseball. I knew I'd always coach it. It was a matter of, do you want to take the gamble and try and push for this to be a career? And I've got a couple of young coaches on my staff right now that aren't making much money either, and they kind of want to do it too. So I've been in their shoes and I kind of go through their life experiences. But Jordan Bishel, who's now at Cincinnati, he called me up when he got the job at Northwood, and he's like, I got $5,000 for you. However, I feel like, if you move here and put everything into it, the athletic director there was pretty progressive, said he's going to try and push for more full-time positions and things like that. So that was the big gamble that I made, where I had to figure out if this is what I really want to do. So I moved to Michigan, about 7 hours from my home, and for $5,000, and basically said, well, now this is it. Like, I got to do it now. So, by the end of my stint at Northwood, I was full time, and that kind of solidified it. But that was a big jump for me, and it was a struggling program, so we weren't guaranteed to win. So basically, I said, listen, if I'm going to do this, we have to win, and I'm going to check it out, see if we can even win here. And he said, fair enough, and walked around campus, saw the indoor facility and the batting cage. They had 4 batting cages, nice big turf room. And I was like, okay, yeah, we can win here. So took the chance. We had some good seasons, actually, which was awesome. They had never made a regional before we got there, made 3 while we were there. And, the rest is kind of history after that. That was kind of the big gamble I made.
Well, that's kind of what I'm hearing as I hear about your story. You got to take these leaps. You get these chances in life, and it's kind of a crap or get off the pot opportunities. But you also had to bet on yourself. You had to bet on yourself and see if this is what you really wanted to do. But other thing I noticed in your story, Coach, is you're just talking about some of the who's who of baseball in the state of Wisconsin. Some of these mentors, some of these guys you've worked for or played for. As you're going through your career. So maybe go back into there. What are some of the lessons you learned from the coaches you mentioned or the people you worked under?
Yeah, well, Tom Winsky, he's the base running bunting coach at Cincinnati now, but he's a Hall of Fame coach for St. Norbert. Basically, the base running aspect of things, but understanding how to put a practice plan together, and things like that. That was kind of where I got my start with all that. And he actually gave me free reign with the infield as a head coach, and I had never coached anything in my life. So he's just like, yeah, you're going to have the infielders for 40 minutes today. That was kind of our first practice plan. So I whipped out a yellow notepad and started scribbling stuff down as quickly as I could to try and figure out what I wanted to do. We got better at it as we went. Everything I learned of bunting and base running, I've pretty much gotten from him. He's a guru when it comes to that. Bishel, I worked with Bishel at St. Norbert. He was the pitching coach under Winsky as well as me. It's funny, things have gone full circle with those two. But working under Jordan, I learned a lot about the process. That was the big thing, was not to get too wound up in result-based thinking and really just concentrate on where your feet are. What do you have to accomplish today? Learned how to manage lineups better and learned a lot about utilizing your players to help them have the most amount of success that they can have, and then thus having the most amount of success that your team can have. So I learned a lot from him. With that, worked under Jake Sable for a year. He's at Central Michigan. He's the head coach there. Um, he gave me a lot of free reign as the head assistant there to do a lot of stuff with practice planning and everything. So picked up a bunch from there. I actually coached under Kevin Tomaszewicz at Oshkosh, so worked under him for a year and learned some stuff from him. So there's been a lot of coaches that I've worked under and with, and I still, we have phone conversations all the time with the guys from Cincinnati just to talk about various things. But yeah, there's some really good coaches that I've coached for. Oh, I forget about Pat Bloom too. I played under Pat Bloom for 3 years. An organizational genius, I would say, probably the most type A person I've ever met in my life. Every little thing was accounted for. Every little detail mattered. Of course, as a player, you're annoyed by that, and you don't learn that that's okay until you're done you're done playing for the guy. And then I was like, oh, maybe that stuff did matter a little bit. So, yeah, and we actually played Pat Bloom this year over in Wash U. So it'll be a little weird, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, that's outstanding. Yeah, and I think like so many of those lessons are caught. Like you're caught, not so much taught to you. It's not they sat down and taught you. It's just like you watched them go through their process. You lived that life. You played for it. You worked under it, and now you get a chance to obviously run your own program. All roads lead back to Stevens Point. This conversation, you've had a tremendous start to this part of your career, and so maybe give us like the flyover view of Stevens Point baseball right now, like life inside of a pointer. Kind of to walk us through what your program looks like today.
Well, from a baseball perspective, my goal and my hopes for the guys is to simplify it to the point of ridiculously easy. So baseball is a really complicated game, but you have to, was it Greg Maddox who said simplify the complex? I think it was him or somebody like that. But just that's what genius is taking the complex and making it easy to understand, So we have a very simple hitting approach, and we teach it to them. We have a very simple pitching approach. We teach that to them. Simple defensive approach and a simple base running approach. And we go through all of our, I guess we can call them rules of base running or rules of pitching. This is what we're going to do. Here's why it works. Here's why I want you to do it. Now go find a way to make that happen. And if they just concentrate on those simple things, I feel like I can alleviate a lot of pressure from them because these college kids and anybody in general, not just college kids, but they have a lot of thoughts in their head. They're thinking about a lot of different things. They got girlfriends and parties and all these things they're thinking about. So when they get to the ballpark, it could be a challenge for them. So one of the things that's just is so important, like, hey, this is the drill we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here's the point of it. Here's why it's going to make you better. And if you just concentrate on that drill, that rep, that whatever it is you're doing, you can really make huge strides as you go along. But from a baseball perspective, it's simplicity, absolutely simplicity. From a everything else perspective, we talk a lot about the process. We talk a lot about, I use analogies, history lessons, a lot of battlefield stuff. I like to use Civil War stuff or Alexander the Great stuff because everybody likes to learn through stories or parables or whatever. But when we talk about those types of things, that kind of puts it into a little bit more perspective so they can kind of concentrate on what little thing they have to concentrate in front of them.
I appreciate that. Well, anybody who's listening, understands the caliber of play you guys are at, the conference you're in, the highest level of Division III baseball, not just in the state of Wisconsin, but across the country. So right now going into 2025, your wheels are always turning, sometimes turning faster than others. We're recording this on February 20th. Where are you at right now in your preseason? What does it look like as you get your guys ready to take off for spring here?
Yeah, so a lot of live hitting from our pitchers. They have to get their live sets in, so basically trying to get them to a point where they can start a game. What's nice is you get to compete at that level. Pitcher versus hitter. It doesn't get much better than that for baseball, so it's a great way to overcome failure for both sides. and a great way to get yourself mentally prepared to play. So that's kind of the biggest thing we're in right now. Situational stuff, whether it's defensive or base running, we're pretty much ready to go right now. The next 2 weeks, we'll probably, rehash a couple things, but they've been taught basically everything they need to know. Aside from some weird, freakish stuff that could happen in a game, we should be ready and prepared to play. But who knows? I never know until that first game happens.
Well, and I think that's something, mostly people listening to this are high school coaches like myself. We have such cramped time. And, how do you get everything in? Do you try to put everything in? How do you condense it? How do you simplify? What does that look like? So maybe give us some of your tips. Like, how do you balance, live matchups, live at-bats with drill and skill and working situational baseball? Like, what is your guys' process and practice planning?
It is nice being full time. So and not having to teach a course or do something like that. Because I remember Bloom had to teach courses and he was all over the building. I just get to do baseball. So the biggest thing for me is I spend a ton of my time planning practice. I probably spend for one practice 2 hours at least. Um, some of the first practices of the year before I get kind of a system going could take up to 3 or 4 hours for a practice. So I want to make sure that each player has instruction from coach is hitting X amount of time, is defending X amount of time, is base running X amount of time. And there's a couple ways you can do it. If I wanted to be lazy, I could just say, okay, we're all hitting. And you've got 25 hitters standing around 2 batting cages, and you could make up drills to go around a big hitting rotation. You could do that. The problem is there's a lot of drill work I don't think they get a lot out of. So divide and conquer, right? So you get a group of 6 maybe in 2 batting cages. Well, what do you do with the other 18 guys or 17 guys? Well, we do have base running stations. Okay, well, that can take 3 or 4 guys, 5, 6 guys, whatever it is. And then you can do defensive work, right? And if you have the coaching staff, and we've got great assistant coaches this year, the best I've ever had, in terms of how many they are. So it's no rip on Zach and Travis. They were very good assistant coaches too, but I've got more now. So they're able to take small groups and then we can rotate them through. But again, you've got live bullpens, you've got live cage matchups. You want to work, drill work off tee. You want to work batting practice. You want to work hack attack, velo. You want to do, but you can't. You can't just send everybody at once. You have to kind of divide it up, figure out who can teach what the best, how the guys can get the most out of the practice. Catcher's got to catch a pen, and then they got to run and do hitting. I mean, I know a lot of high school catchers have told me they don't get many live at bats because they're catching all the live at bats, and that's one of the things that we try and figure out how can we overcome the catchers trying to face the pitchers and all that stuff. So I spend a ton of time doing it. Plus, we've only got 2 hours to go. So, I make sure that we're very, very efficient with our time and everybody knows where they need to be. It also helps. I post a practice plan a day in advance. So like, today's practice starts kind of at 5-ish. So even though we're talking and we can talk I could talk up until 4:59 if I wanted to. Frankly, that practice will run itself by this point. I've got my charters figured out. I've got all my drill instructors figured out. Everybody knows where they need to be. So when we walk into the gym, I'll walk in at 5 o'clock exactly. Everything will be, it's a beautiful display. Everything's going the way I want it. And when it doesn't, then we got to figure out how to fix that practice plan. But I just spend a lot of time doing it.
Well, and I think that's a true art. People think about baseball coaching. I think outside of the industry, they think, well, yeah, you're managing the game and you call the right play at the right time. But designing the right training environment and making sure it's efficient and productive, and probably how to weight what to spend time on. So when you go through your process, is there a way that you okay, we need to spend our, I don't know, training economy on this more than this, or we need to touch on this a couple times, or really focus on this part of the game. And what does that process look like? Is it a Google Doc? How do you post it? Is it like a physical post in a locker room? Do you send it on a group text? Like, how do you get that out to your guys so early?
Yeah. So in terms of the practice plan itself, I text. We don't have team captains, so what I do is give different jobs to different guys, and hopefully they respond to those jobs. So one of the jobs for one of the guys is just, hey, I'm going to text you a picture of the practice plan. You put it in the group chat, like something simple like that, something they can execute. So they put in the group chat. Everybody's on their phone all day long, so they see it. There's no excuse not to. Usually we post one in the locker room, post one at the field or wherever we're going to practice. And I do that about 24 hours, 20 hours before practice. It's always a huge relief as a coach to get that out. So good, we're done. So that's kind of where it's at with that. In terms of like, how do we divvy out what we do? It's a pie chart, right? You only have so much time and you can only do so many things, you got to figure out what you want to be good at. So some coaches want to be good at base running, so you got to practice it. Base running is not a what is called a skill that you're born with. It's not instinctual. You have to be taught it, and bunting is another skill that needs to be taught and repped. And how much of that do we want to spend? And not all of our guys bunt, right? So I got a bunch of big fat guys who are going to hit the ball out of the park. Those guys aren't going to bunt. I'll never put on a bunt sign for them. So it does not pay for them to practice bunting. So certain guys will bunt in bunt groups and other guys will not, and they'll do something different, whatever it is that curtails to their skill set. But when I send out that practice plan, it's kind of a relief for me. Like, okay, it's done. They know where to go. Like, for example, today, I think we got hitting groups starting at 5. I know my coaches will take care of that. I don't even have to be honest, if I wasn't at practice, I don't think anybody would notice.
Oh, that's good. Well, we appreciate that because, as coaches are getting that time of year, it's time to plan. Are you indoor? Are you outdoor? Do you have half a gym? Do you have the turf? Do you have the turf football field? Do you have one cage? Like there's, like I said, a real skill in like what resources do I have? If is it facilities, is it coaches, and how do I best maximize all those resources to make sure we have the best practice possible? So eventually, it turns into games. You get into in season. Does any of that change for you in season once you're playing a consistent series and weather improves? Does anything change in your practice environment?
Yeah, I kind of have the start tough on them and kind of take the foot off the off the gas a little bit for practice. Like, I don't want to kill the guys once the season starts. We don't need to do access running and things like that. So yeah, I'll if there's something that needs to be corrected, we'll correct that. We'll get those 3 games at WashU to figure out what we stink at. I'm sure it'll be something, so we have to try and fix that for them before we go to Florida. But yeah, practice is a little more simplified, easier, on the guys once the season starts, because unless there's a situational thing that you're bad at, they should. I mean, once you're in games, it's kind of hard to put the same practice plans preparing for games as well once you've started games, I think.
Appreciate that. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit to obviously practice planning, game planning, executing is part of your job too. But the other piece is the recruiting piece. Like I said, a lot of high school coaches, maybe some college coaches listen to this. And, when you're out on the recruiting trail, what does your process look like? Where are you going to see kids? Are there things that you're looking for specifically? How does a kid get on your radar? And maybe more importantly, how does a kid get crossed off your list? Like what's your philosophy there as a staff?
Yeah, I work at Impact Sports Academy out of Green Bay, so that was another job. I totally forgot to mention that. That was another job I was doing while I was trying to coach. But so I'm a 17U coach, so I travel around with the 17U ISA team. Got to know a lot of the players that come through there really well, so that's a great way to meet guys and see what they're like personality wise and whether they can play. So I'm at all the travel ball stuff pretty much all summer. One of our assistant coaches is a Legion coach, so we hit that up as well to try and see as many kids as we possibly can. Legion's a little more challenging because they're not all 17Us, right? There's some kids that have graduated. There's some kids that are young. I mean, it's kind of a crapshoot with that. Yeah, but we start by, hey, does this kid have the physical tools to play at some point? Like, we don't really recruit kids that I think are going to like start right away. I mean, we'd love to have them start right away. It was really hard. A lot of kids don't understand how hard it is to come into college and start. I'm not against playing freshmen. I've played freshmen. I played 4 freshmen last year, but that doesn't make them ready to play, right? That doesn't mean that they're ready to go. So right now we're doing a lot of live cage matchups. A lot of our younger pitchers and younger hitters are struggling because they haven't seen the kind of talent and pitching and scouting and things like that you have in high school. And that's nothing against high school. It's just a little more developed once you get to college. So when I recruit guys, I'm recruiting guys that I think at some point will start for us. At some point, they don't have to start as freshmen. But at some point, there's a the bat will translate, or the arm strength is there. They can really field the ball. For pitchers, you look at, can he throw strikes? What does his breaking ball look like? You need breaking pitches in the WIAC, or else they'll just crush you. So it doesn't really matter how hard you throw. Is there movement on your fastball? That kind of stuff. And then you kind of get to know the player. I talk to high school coaches or college or travel ball coaches and just see what kind of guy the kid is. For the most part, I get a good review on the kid, but I have gotten some that they're like, I will not put my neck out. I'll not stick my neck out for that kid. So then if he won't do it, which is, hard to find, but if they won't, then yeah, we won't recruit him. But you kind of get to know the kid that way. Something that could get you crossed off a list. I've crossed kids off the list for, swearing at umpires and things like that. Really bad negative behavior, and then I'll usually cross check it with their coach, and if it's a continual problem, then it's a no-go, because we don't really have a lot of time for attitude issues or effort issues. If there's an effort issue, that's a problem too. Those are pretty much the biggest things that'll cross you off the list. Other than, say, if there's a talent deficiency, then that will, of course, but it's mainly effort and attitude that can get you crossed off.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Before I get into the travel ball scene, because I think that's a really unique part of what you do, I wanted to go back a little bit to your roster makeup. You talked about playing 4 freshmen last year, recruiting a high school kid. Do you have a roster full of, is it mostly older guys? Is it high school kids that you recruited, a little bit of kids out of the transfer portal? Like, what's your 2025 roster makeup roughly look like? Kind of give us that pie chart of a breakdown of where they came from.
Oh, we are young. We are very young. So last year we were old. I don't know. We graduated maybe 14 seniors last year, and those were the kids from COVID and when I first got here. So they were freshmen. So I had like a double freshman class when I first got here. So, they were very experienced. They were fifth year guys. Very old team on the mound. Very old in the field. So we lost all of them, and of course now the guys I kind of recruited, we're going to find out. We're going to find out what we have. I don't even know. So, we got some guys who can play and some guys who need some work. I don't know, but I'd say the vast majority of our players are going to be juniors and sophomores this year. We have one senior position player that plays consistently in Anthony Tomzak. He's a Muskego kid. He'll catch for us. Brand new everything. Other than that, pitching staff we did some portaling with that because we lost so many guys. Hoping to plug a few guys in. We got one for sure reliever, one for sure starter, probably 2 for sure starter / long relief kind of guys. The portal, I don't really like it that much, to be honest. I don't think it's that great for college sports, but it is there. So if I've got pieces that need to be, or holes that need to be filled, I can go into the portal and try and utilize that. So, but yeah, your guess is as good as mine of how good we're going to be. It's I have no idea.
I appreciate that. All right. Well, I want to go back to the club ball, travel ball circuit. You talk about coaching at ISA, 17U. So you know exactly what it's like to kind of what the 12-month calendar for a high school kid is, right? They're at the clubs, roughly 9 months a year. High school gets them for 3 months. They kind of pass them back. Um, so what we're seeing all over the state now is this influx of academies, clubs of all sizes. All right. Some gorgeous facilities. Some people, in my opinion, do great work with these kids. But at times there's still some of that tension between the high school program, the club program. How are you seeing the best programs navigate some of that? Maybe just start there, and maybe some advice from your chair, both on the club side and on the college side, thinking about what's best for the player.
Yeah, well, you see an overusage of. I think the pitching is the biggest thing. You see an overusage of pitching. The I was talking to another coach. He's had 3 Tommy Johns in the last 12 months on his roster. We're trying to figure out if that's coming from overuse in high school, if it's coming from overuse in travel ball, or if the kids are just throwing too much in general, or if it's just a result of the kids throwing harder. They could just be throwing harder, and the tendons or whatever just can't keep up. I don't know what it is. I do know that there is a little bit of a delicate balance between the teaching of, like, if a high school teaches X, for hitting style, and ISA teaches X or Y for hitting style, that there can be a clash there, which, to navigate that, I try not to step on anybody's toes for when I'm coaching the ISA kids. So I kind of let them do what the high school allows them to do from my vantage point. But what I do think, with the 17U kids, because those kids are pretty well developed by that point, I like to really go strong into the mental game and into trying to figure out when to maybe, throw that long hop across the diamond, or when to set up a cut for home, or when a good time to bunt, or when a good pitch call would be at that time. And there's not so much, you know, friction between the high school level when you just talk more of the mental side of it. Because if I'm going to try and revamp a kid's swing, and he's been working on that swing, with high school for 4 months, I'd be it would be kind of silly for me to try and redo all of that stuff. But there are definitely some mental side of things that I think, because high school only has a couple of weeks to go over a lot of things. You guys are frantically trying to figure out who can pitch, who can hit, who can do anything. So some of that stuff gets lost, and then I kind of like to do the mental side of it, and I've done a lot more of that with our guys now than before. So I don't really do as much coaching as I used to from a baseball perspective.
Well, I'm glad you went there, because one of my questions I really want to stick on is, like, what's the biggest deficiencies you're seeing, with high school kids coming in? But you have such a unique perspective because you're seeing them while they're in high school. And I mean, obviously not every kid, but you're on the ground floor with them in the summer with 17U, right? So these are just finished their juniors in high school, a little bit older kid. But, like, let's start on the mental side. Like, where do you see, and there's probably not exactly one answer, but, like, what are a couple examples of deficiencies you're seeing in their mental game? So yeah, what comes to mind for that?
Yeah, we talk. Yeah, that's where do I start with that? A lot of the pitchers that we're getting, they throw hard. They throw way harder than anybody when I was in high school and college. Like, when I was in college, a 90-mile-an-hour arm was kind of a big deal. They got drafted. We probably had 4 or 5 a year, 90-mile-an-hour arms. They all got drafted. They were all really good. Now you're seeing kids in the upper eights, like, consistently. But the big thing is they don't. A lot of them don't throw any strikes. So that's one of the things, because they push the velo thing so hard, and that's fine, because we look at velo like anybody else. But if you want to win the game, you can't just throw hard and walk everybody. That doesn't do us any good. So I think that's one of the things. Exit readings with hitters. Yeah, we want our guys to be able to hit the ball really hard. No doubt about that. We take exit readings as well. But, like, man, if you can't have a good approach at the plate, and you're swinging at sliders that bounce and things like that, that's kind of where we're running into a little bit of the mental side of things. It's being able to play baseball, because I see a lot of very toolsy players, but they don't play the game very well sometimes. So you know, also trying to teach some kids, don't, I mean, I don't know if this is just a societal thing or the portal or NIL stuff, but there's kids who don't, care about winning the game, right? They care about their stats, or they care about how hard did I throw? It's like, dude, you just got rocked. I don't care how hard you were throwing. Like, um, you walked everybody on the planet. I don't care if you were 98 or 96 or 46. Like, it doesn't really matter if you can't throw strikes. So I think that's been a big challenge when it comes to trying to coach guys in this day and age. But you kind of have to, and I said this a little bit with the infield practice, you kind of have to make it fun and make it competitive, and teach them that when you show up every day, there's a winner, there's a loser. You got to kind of go at it hard and see what happens. It's more than just your velo or your exit velo or your 60 time. Baseball's an intricate sport.
All right. So you talk about competing and creating that competition in a practice environment. If it's indoors, outdoors, infield play, whatever, like give us some of your best like practice tips and how do you guys do it? How do kids are less competitive, they less, like how do you guys manufacture that so it translate to when it matters the most?
Yeah, well, you got to put something on the line usually, even if it's just pride or a sticker or I don't know, they don't have to clean up or they don't have to run sprints or they get to travel or they get to start. I mean, you got to put something on the line, I think. But you got to compete in practice. Competition is what we do. It's what makes it fun. So we have, oh my gosh, I mean, I don't even have time to go through how many competitions we have, but infield practice, I mean, just in the slides I showed, I probably have 10 to 15 competitions that we do. And I probably run one or two. Well, I shouldn't say now, but like when I was an infield coach, run one or two a day. And, you have a winner and you have a loser. Maybe the loser has to do 5 burpees. I don't know. Something simple like that. Just to remind them you stunk today, right? You weren't any good. We got to be better tomorrow. I remember when I was infield practicing, when I was the infield coach at Northwood, every Friday was like a 6 a.m. practice, right? But every Friday I did like infield Olympics. So we did, I don't know, 5 or 6 drills. And you had a partner and you had to find a way to, you and your partner had to win the drills, whatever they were, tennis ball picks. We did hack attack picks, scoops, ladder relay races, whatever it was. And they would just get so jacked for Friday on the infield, right? And that was fun to watch. It was actually a really fun practice to coach because, the guys were flying around, they were having a good time. And then I think as a punishment, the worst team had to play catch with like a really bad first baseman's glove. I mean, it was horrible. It was like an A200 glove. It didn't fold right. The strings were all tattered. It was, it was just a terrible glove. And I don't ever know what happened to that glove. I probably have to retext all the infielders to see who lost that last Olympic game. But they would play catch with that glove, and they'd have to kind of two-hand or commander it and try and. But it was funny. The guys always razzed them, and the glove always exchanged hands, and it made it, it made it enjoyable, right? And that was just infield practice. We do, our outfield coach does outfield competitions with the guys. We do hitting competitions, and of course, we chart everything. So, every pitch a pitcher throws in practice is charted. So there's something on the line there, right? And then I post results at the end of the week and set up with here's where you're good, here's the guys that aren't as good in certain spots. And I don't know, I just think it's fun competing and it's fun seeing how you're doing in practice and stuff. I think it helps. But
Absolutely. Well, you were laying out just kind of that sixth tool, right? The makeup, the mental game, all those things. Like other tools, where are you seeing gaps with high school kids? You talked about like the lack of strike throwing, but the velo's there. So are you seeing with bat to ball skills on offense, like what other deficiencies you're seeing where your freshmen are coming in and they're just behind? Obviously, there's a physical gap. I mean, you could obviously talk on that if
yep.
you want, but what other gaps do you see in between that high school freshman, right, who was all Johnny high school, Johnny everything, comes into a program like yours, who's competing for a World Series every year? What gaps are you seeing, on the skill and drill and the physical side?
Yeah. So yeah, they're physically almost ready to go. That's the big thing. They just have way more access to the weight room and all things like that than we did when I was playing. But yeah, again, when your approach at the plate, they're seeing curveballs that perhaps spin a little harder than they had before. The pitcher doesn't tip them as much, right? So they're behind there. The approach at the plate is a big one. Bunting is a skill that is completely lost. And I can understand why. It's hard to coach bunting when you have 2 weeks to prepare for a season or a month or whatever it is. Like bunting's probably not high on the priority list. And I come from the academies. I know that, bunting's not a huge skill that's taught because coaches, the idea being, well, college will teach you how to bunt if you need to. So that's a skill that's way behind is bunting, especially with a lot of the hitters we get or any of the college hitters. They're usually the best players on their team. So they're not bunting, right? They're not bunting in high school. Why would they? And they're certainly not bunting in travel ball. So that's a big skill. Our catchers, our freshman catchers during situational stuff, usually cuts and relays, have a knack for calling the wrong base pretty consistently. So I don't know what that is. I don't know how that happened, but our cuts and relays it's almost comical at times. They'll be like, why did you call second on a ball that's rattling around in the gap? Like we got guys running all over the field. Who are you going to throw out at second in that situation? And they're like, I don't know, coach. I was just throwing out numbers, 2, 1, 3, 4. They're just throwing out number. They have no idea. So that, and we have like rules on that. So like now they're getting the rules. So they know if the ball's hit in this spot, it's an automatic to whatever. So those are some of the things a little bit that, that they're kind of lacking. Our pitchers chart our bullpens. So usually the freshmen forget to put their name on it, forget the date, I had one kid who did all of his mathematics on it and came out with 107% strike ratio. And I was like, oh man, this is a great pen, guys. I mean, you're striking guys out in 2 pitches when you're doing that. I'm like, you were 23 for 22 on fastballs? How is that even possible? He's like, yeah, you're right, coach. Yeah, I know I'm right. How did you not think about that? So some of that stuff, but they pick it up. They usually pick it up within a year or so.
That's awesome. Quick, again, you hit it right on the head with the high school kid, right? Bunting, especially the short game. Like now at your level, you got a little more leverage, maybe. I mean, obviously we do in high school too, but like, how do you create some buy-in? All right, a kid gets work. I don't want to do bunting. A lot of kids go to the bunting stations just to waste time so they can go hit off the machine or whatever it may be. Like, how do you guys, teach it? How do you instill that mentality? And maybe it's as simple as you're just not going to play if you can't execute. So give us some of like easy ways into that conversation, because kids, in some ways, like you said, have never bunted in their lives.
Yeah, that is a tough one. We take a look at our roster and we say, okay, who are you calling on to bunt in this situation? And like I said, with the big fat guys who can hit, they're not bunting. So they don't even have to go to bunt group. We don't have a bunt group for them. We don't have to worry about them. So there's kind of a buy-in in the fact like, hey, this is your niche, guys. This is what you're fast, you're left-handed, whatever it is. Like these are free hits for you. And, I'm a big OPS guy. I think that's the best stat for offense. I'm like, that is a free base hit. You're on first base. That's if you can get to first base, the percentages of scoring a run are significantly higher. So just get to first base, and I told them, and I've told these guys, like, if you're going to hit 15, 20 bombs a year, yeah, you can not bunt as much as you want. You can literally not bunt at all. But until you prove that you can do that, you have to utilize other skills, other tools to help us win the game. So the guys who, I think I've had several players that have hit, 12 to 18, 19 home runs in a year. Yeah, those guys they're never going to bunt for us. They've proven that they can mash the ball out of the park on any given swing. But if you can't prove that, you're going to have to find other ways to utilize your skills. And I think they've bought into that. Like, I'm trying to help you increase your OPS because you're not going to do it just by, mashing balls. I mean, you're going to have to do something else. And they get it, right? And there's a little bit of a buy-in there, with that simple fact. But yeah, getting a guy to bunt, like getting him to be comfortable bunting, that's the biggest problem, right? They get it. They're like, yeah, I know how to bunt, whatever. But like getting them to buy into the fact that they should bunt, that's the challenge. So again, you make it fun. You set up challenges. You set up, competitions. You bunt off the machine, you bunt off coaches. There's cones. You try and hit the coach with the bunt, right? If he's laying down, something like that, maybe try and hit him in the face, bunt it right in the face, right? So make the coach flinch, whatever it is. Like, get them to enjoy it, get them to have fun with it.
I appreciate that, Coach. Before I step out of like the practice planning and kind of baseball totally side, anything else you could think of? Anything else for coaches as they get their season going? Just on like any other tips for game planning, pre-game, during game, practice environment you think that like could really be helpful to a coach listening right now?
I just always, I think one of the big things is looking at your guys and really assessing what they can do. A lot of, and I've done this myself. Well, this kid should hit X, Y, and Z. He should hit 10 bombs. He should hit whatever. And they don't, right? They just don't. And that's okay. You have to find ways to get more out of them in other aspects of the game. You can't just say, well, he should do this, and he doesn't. Well, if he doesn't do it ever, like in practice, and he doesn't do it in a game either, he's just not going to magically do it. So sometimes we take a leap of faith and hope a kid's just going to figure it out, but and be really, really good. But sometimes you just have to have the expectation of, okay, this is what he is. Here's the talent that he has. How do I, as a coach or a manager, utilize what he's doing? Not what I want him to do, not what I think he can do, but what is he doing right now? What can he do to help us win the game? Now, if he starts hitting and all of a sudden mashing baseballs, well, then you got yourself a great surprise. But I think a lot of coaches say, oh, he's going to hit 500, he's going to hit 400, and then they don't, and you kind of set yourself up to have this really, really good hitter, and he doesn't quite match up to what your standard is for him. And, you get frustrated, he gets frustrated. And instead of just concentrating on the little thing that he could have done to gotten better, he's worried about all these lofty things that sometimes coaches put that pressure and too much on that. So, just trying to understand, what can your guys do, right? What can they not do, right? And then we'll figure it out from there.
That's some great advice, Coach. I appreciate that. I got a couple more questions for you. I know you got practice going on a little bit here, but giving us a ton of advice, walked us through many great places and things to think about. What about you? What's some of the best like leadership and coaching advice that you've gotten that just like rings true with you to this day?
Oh man, the best coaching advice. I talk to a lot of coaches, especially here in the athletic department, because they're all down the hall with me, so I get to pick their brains a lot. You have to be true to yourself as a coach. So I am a pretty laid back coach. Here's what we're going to do. Here's why it's going to work. Now go out and do that. And I'm not the guy who's going to just blow them up for a loss or praise them for a win. I'm going to be very direct and matter of fact. Now, one of my really close buddies, who's the women's basketball coach here, shout out Matt Hockett. They just had a big win last night. He and I are close, but he is animated, right? And this guy is in practice. He's all over the map, in your face, sweating, the whole thing, right? This is a completely opposite coach. And it's funny because the girls, his girls are like, you should coach more like Nat. And my guys are like, hey, you should coach more like Matt. And it's like, you can't. And the reason you can't is because that's not me, right? It wouldn't be him to just kind of sit back the way I do and kind of observe and critique and analyze. And I think that's one of the big things that I learned is you have to be true to yourself. You cannot be somebody you're not, right? You can't just have a temper tantrum at the guys because you feel like you should. You have to genuinely be upset about something to have that temper tantrum or that stern talk or whatever it is. You can't just start flipping chairs if that's not your personality. The guys will just start, scratching their heads and laughing at you, like if you're not yourself. So I think that's the best advice, is to be yourself. Also, you got to stick with what you're doing. You got to have a plan going into the season. It's not always going to be right, but you really got to invest in that plan, and you got to get the guys to buy into it, because there's got to be a reason why you're doing it. There's a lot, man. I've been at practice where we're doing a drill and it's just a bad drill. I think every coach has been guilty of doing a bad drill. and you want to commit to it, and you think it's going to be good, and you think it's going to be a great drill, and it just is a dud, right? And you got to critique yourself a little bit and try and figure out, okay, what did we get out of it? What am I trying to get out of it? How do I get the guys to either buy into this drill, or was it a bad drill, right? Those kinds of things. So trying to really self diagnose what you're doing, how you're doing it. I don't know. I think those are kind of the things that I try and do, and that's probably the best advice I've gotten, is and not wasting time, right? Activity without accomplishment. It's a funny cliche, but it's so true. When you're just doing something, it's not getting you better or doing anything. So, but those are a few of the things I've learned from coaches.
All right, last one. I've held you hostage for almost an hour here. So now this is where I cut the mic. I gotta let you give like a recruiting pitch here. So players are listening, families are listening, coaches are listening. Like, give us a little bit of recruiting. Take as much time as you need, and I'll roll this into the outro.
Is this what I'm saying to a player?
Yes, yeah. Give us your pitch to a player.
Okay. Well, the biggest thing I tell them is I want you to want to be here. Okay, I will not sit here and beg you to be here. I am not going to try and coerce you into being here. I'm not going to say, "Oh, here, this is why you want to be here." I'm going to tell you what we do, why it's successful, why it works, why we think you'd be a great fit, and then it's up to you to kind of decide. So, basically, we've won a lot here. We're organized. You have a role on this team. The guys are great. They're a good time. You'll get a chance to meet them, at lunch or around campus. You can commit to me, and that's fine. But you're committing more to the players and the atmosphere, because you're going to spend 2 hours with me a day, and you're going to spend 22 hours a day or 24 hours a day with your brothers on the team. And when you feel it and you just know that it's going to be a great place to play, it makes your decision really easy. But like I said, I don't beg kids to play. I want them to play. That if I recruit you and you're sitting in the office and we're talking, it's because I want you to be here. But man, if you don't want to be here, it's a really tough for both of us. So here's what we have to offer. What do you think? I guess it would be what it is. That would be my pitch, or that is my pitch usually to the kids coming in. Stevens Point, right in the middle of the state. No one's ever really that far from family if they're a Wisconsin kid. You get a chance to compete for championships. Your best friends will be on the team. I still have a group chat with like 25 guys from when I played. This would be the best 4 or 5 years of your life. 6 or 7 if you're some of the COVID guys. It's more of a feel like, here's what we are. Hopefully you like it.
All right, Coach. I'm sorry, man. I got to go one more. I just glossed over my questions. I got to ask you the $1 million Brian Kane question. Recruiting pitch was awesome. You're authentically yourself. We appreciate it. But what do you know now that you wish you knew when you started coaching?
That's a really tough one. When I first started coaching, I didn't realize how much personality meant to practice and to the game. Like, it'd be nice if they were all robots, because then you just tell them what to do. You program them in, and then they go out and they just do the things you taught them. But there are guys who don't want to buy in. There's guys who will buy into anything you say, even if you say it's wrong. There's guys who want to question things. There's guys who are over analytical. There are so many personalities. Oh man, the one thing I wish I knew was how important it would be to relate to players right away. Like, I don't think I did a bad job of it by any means. I think I'm pretty easy to get along with in terms of that. But like, understanding that when you get into coaching, whatever you say isn't gold. They're not going to just take whatever you say and run with it. Also, I've learned, and I don't talk a lot, so this is like the most. I think I give a 5-minute speech once a week to our guys. Right? I'll talk to individuals about what they need to improve on and stuff, but I don't get up and give a big rousing speech. I used to think that everything everybody hinged on every word I said, right? And that they'd take it all home and listen to it. And that's what I thought when I first started coaching. And now I realize they don't really listen to me all that much. they really don't. So now I keep it way shorter than I ever have before. I stick to the point. I try not to get too long-winded, because if you do, man, you start to see those eyes go to the ceiling and you start to see guys not paying attention. When I started coaching, I thought, oh my gosh, I've got the floor. I'm going to talk and they're going to listen to everything. They don't. I think I mentioned this earlier. I give like a history lesson every year, either 1 or 2 history lessons. It's usually a war or some sort of a battle, or trying to relate it to our season. I'm a huge history guy, so I love that stuff. And I've told the story, which is an awesome story, of the Battle of Tyre, where they're trying to, like, Alexander the Great has to get to an island, so he's got to build this land bridge to get out there. And I make the metaphor about how we're trying to build a land bridge, right, with the rocks and to get out to Tyre, and that's kind of the goal, right? And I said that at the beginning of the year, and that was kind of my pregame thing. And then maybe a month later, I was like, you guys remember the Battle of Tyre we talked about? Half the team's like, no, no idea. One of the guys like, is that where they were building stones? And I was like, close enough, And it's funny because you tell these stories and you think it's a great story, and they are, and the kids sometimes get it and sometimes they don't, but they just, you got to get their personalities. You got to figure out what makes them tick. You got to figure out that you're not as important as you think you are sometimes. And I think now that I've figured that out a little bit, I can just let those guys play and have fun doing it. And maybe it's best if I just don't say anything at all sometimes, and that's one thing I've learned as I've gone.
And there it is. Huge thank yous out to Coach Richter for sitting down with us today. It was so fun just to talk to him in his office, just a few minutes before practice starts. Practice plans up and rolling. Guys know what they got going on. I think about how much anxiety at times I have in just planning a practice and executing a practice. So it just tells me a lot about his demeanor and his calmness, just to say, hey, kind of the hay's being put in the barn and we're getting ready for our season. And anyways, a couple weeks before they get started in regards to games, and college baseball will be off and running at all levels here real soon, and then that sets the stage for high school baseball. I know on the high school side we're just a couple weeks away, but for the podcast, for you listeners, again, thank you to those I was able to see and talk to in Madison at the clinic last weekend. Great to connect with some people, some old friends, some new people. A lot of really nice comments about these episodes, so I really do appreciate that. And for Coach Richter, he's again spoke at our clinic. Did an incredible session on indoor infield training. Had some really good nuggets for us and some competitions. And you get to see once again why these programs are at such a high level, playing at a national level in Division III baseball and across the state of Wisconsin. It's just in incredible hands. And I'm just once again very grateful for Nat to jump on this episode with us. Thanks again for the support. It means a ton to me. And until the next episode, have a great rest of your day.